In the Cauca Valley of southwest Colombia, a farmer in a white straw hat whistles to his herd and calls it the best hotel in the country. Not for people, for cows. The best hotel for a cow, says Carlos Hernando Molina, smiling. It has controlled temperatures, very good quality food, and the cows sleep placidly. His farm, El Hatico, has been in his family since the late 1700s, 9 generations on the same piece of land. For most of that history, his ancestors' cows grazed in open pastures under the tropical sun. But in the last 3 decades, Molina and his family have turned this place into something that looks less like a farm and more like a jungle with cows in it. And that transformation, from bare pasture to multi-story forest, might just hold one of the most important lessons for how we produce food on a warming planet. It's a story that stretches back nearly a century, involves a family that refused to give up on their land, and ends with a simple truth: sometimes the best way to save a forest is to put a cow in it. Here's the problem. Globally, livestock and their feed take up 30% of all ice-free land on Earth. Clearing land for cattle is the single biggest driver of deforestation in the Amazon. In Colombia alone, cattle occupy 80% of all agricultural land, more than any other use. About 300,000 hectares of forest are cleared every year, much of it for low-productivity pasture. And in most of those pastures, the soil is degrading, the biodiversity is disappearing, and the cows themselves are suffering from heat stress on open, treeless land. And for years, the Molina family was part of that system. El Hatico started as a conventional cattle ranch, like thousands of others across Colombia. But even in the 1930s, Carlos Molina's grandfather, Ciro Molina Garces, saw what was coming. He wrote about the anguishing seriousness of deforestation and called it the most terrible threat to the future of the region. Decades before the climate crisis was a global conversation, the Molina family was watching their landscape disappear. By the 1980s, the Cauca Valley had been largely converted to sugarcane monoculture. Herbicides, pesticides, and bare soil farming had pushed wildlife to the edge. The only dark patch of forest left on the aerial photos was El Hatico itself, a tiny green island in a sea of industrial agriculture. In 1993, the family made a radical decision. They stopped fighting against nature and started working with it. They planted trees. Not just a few, but thousands, across the entire farm. Native hardwoods like mahogany and samania. Protein-packed forage trees like lucina, whose leaves contain almost as much protein as soybean meal. Mesquite trees whose sweet seed pods cows will walk across an entire paddock to reach. Thornless varieties of tropical shrubs that fix nitrogen in the soil. And they didn't remove the cows to do it. Instead, they brought the trees to the cows, planting them in alleys, in clusters, and along every fence line. This is called silvopasture, from the Latin for forest and pasture. It's the intentional integration of trees, grass, and livestock on the same piece of land. It sounds simple, but the results are anything but. First, the trees change the microclimate. On a hot tropical day, the canopy cools the ground by several degrees. Cows that aren't heat-stressed eat more, produce more milk, and gain weight faster. Second, the trees feed the cows. Lucina leaves are up to 30% protein, far more nutritious than standard tropical grass. Mesquite pods are like natural energy bars. The cows eat a balanced diet without any imported soy or grain supplements. Third, the trees fix the soil. Their roots hold moisture, prevent erosion, and build organic matter. Fallen leaves decompose into rich humus. The farm hasn't used synthetic fertilizer, herbicide, or pesticide in decades. Carlos Molina has a saying about the weeds that used to plague his pastures. The weed becomes a goodness, he says. Under the canopy, problematic broadleaf plants get shaded out naturally. The plants that thrive are the ones the cows want to eat. So-called pests become free feed. The results speak for themselves. Since switching to silvopasture, the Molina family has nearly doubled the number of cows per hectare. Milk production per cow has increased by more than 20%. They produce twice the meat and dairy on the same piece of land, without any chemical inputs. But the real proof came in 2009, when El Niño brought a devastating drought across Latin America. Farms everywhere saw their production collapse. Pastures turned to dust. Cattle died. But at El Hatico, something remarkable happened. Carlos Molina puts it simply, we actually increased production that year. And this was without irrigation. While neighboring farmers were watching their land turn to dust, the deep-rooted trees at El Hatico were still pulling moisture from the subsoil. The canopy was shading the ground, reducing evaporation. The organic matter in the soil was acting like a sponge, holding water from the last rainfall. The system worked because it was designed to survive the extremes. The biodiversity that returned to the farm tells the same story. 145 species of birds now live on El Hatico, including species that were nearly extinct in the Cauca Valley. 141 species of butterflies. Tick-eating birds, black ibises, fulvous whistling ducks. 7 varieties of dung beetle, each playing its own role in breaking down manure and cycling nutrients. But here's what makes this story bigger than one farm in Colombia. Starting in 2012, a partnership between the World Bank, Colombia's Cattle Ranchers Federation, the Nature Conservancy, and a research center called CIPAV began scaling this model across the country. They worked with more than 4,000 family farms in 5 distinct regions, from the Cesar River Valley to the foothills of the Andes. The results are staggering. Over 100,000 hectares have been converted to silvopastoral systems. Farmers planted more than 2,600,000 trees, across 80 different native species. Carbon sequestered, more than 1,200,000 tons. On participating farms, milk productivity increased by an average of 36%. Farmer incomes went up by more than $500 per hectare per year. And all of this happened without clearing a single hectare of primary forest. In fact, secondary forest cover increased. One farmer, Ana Hernandez Diaz, started on a plot that looked like a barren football field. After converting to silvopasture, her cows went from producing 2 liters of milk per day to 4.5. My cows would produce much less milk if it were not for the trees, she says. This is the counterintuitive truth at the heart of silvopasture. The conventional wisdom says you clear trees to make room for cows. But the evidence from Colombia says the opposite, you bring the trees to the cows, and everything gets better. More milk. More meat. More profit. More biodiversity. More carbon in the ground. Less deforestation. It's what the researchers call a win-win, though that's an understatement for a system that seems to solve half a dozen environmental problems at once. There are limits, of course. Silvopasture takes time to establish, 3 to 5 years before the trees are big enough to make a difference. It requires upfront investment that many small farmers can't afford. And it doesn't solve the fundamental math of beef consumption. The world's appetite for meat is still the primary driver of land use change. But what Colombia has proven is that there's a middle path between the destruction of industrial cattle ranching and the fantasy that everyone will stop eating meat. It's not about cows or trees. It's about cows and trees. Carlos Molina puts it best. People no longer see us as romantics, he says. They see us as pragmatics. And pragmatism might be exactly what we need, right now. Because if the choice is between a bare field with skinny, heat-stressed cows and a forest full of birds, butterflies, and thriving livestock, the right answer is staring us in the face. Colombia has proven it at scale, more than 4,000 farms, over 100,000 hectares, and the number keeps growing. Sometimes the best place for a cow is a hotel surrounded by trees. And sometimes the best thing you can do for a forest is invite the cows in.